Okay, it's 7:35, so we're going to go ahead and start. I want to welcome everybody to Harut North America. This is our webinar called Seeds of Hate, the link between high school education and college campus anti-Semitism, Semitism, sorry. Our speaker today is Dr. Brandy Shufutinsky. She is a social worker, writer, and researcher committed to building intercultural learning and communication opportunities. She works with nonpartisan organizations combating anti-Semitism. Brandy, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Miriam. Thanks for inviting me, and thank you everyone for coming to hopefully will be an interesting conversation, not just about what we're seeing and facing, but hopefully getting into ways that we can address it. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen. I have a super short presentation, and then I think we can get into discussion. 1 second. Can you see my screen fine? Here, okay. So ever since the October 7th terrorist attacks against Israel, we've seen a tsunami of anti-Jewish bigotry, much of it making its way into classrooms across the country in the form of curriculum. This is from a lesson taught in a world history class in New Jersey, at a New Jersey high school. I have all of the entire lesson, but this is the beginning slide and then the Who is Hamas slide, which these teachers taught their students that Hamas is a Palestinian political party, an armed resistance movement. You can see resistance movement in bold. So first, I want to make clear that this has been happening in K through 12 education long before October 2023. The reason why this is important to remember is because we're only going to be able to adequately address the problem if we tear out the illiberal ideological roots that are causing it. Simply addressing the post-October 7th anti-Semitism will have us revisit the same issue in the near future. During a webinar held in February of 2022, the Liberated Ethnic Studies Model Consortium, one of the speakers stated that ethnic studies was, quote, co-opted by the California Department of Education, along with other elected leaders who were working very closely with right-wing forces, namely the ADL, the Jewish Community Relations Council, and pro-Israel Zionist and racist organizations and white supremacists, end quote. In another webinar hosted by the same group, Zionism was equated with white supremacy. That webinar took place in April of 2022. In February of 2023, Cheeto, an organization that provides teacher training and curriculum development, held this program, Settler Colonialism from Turtle Island to Palestine. Turtle Island is what they call the United States in Canada. Cheeto collaborates with Teach Palestine and the Middle East Children's Alliance, or MECA. They provide teacher training, they host summer teach-ins that are multiple days, and conferences, and they also help school districts develop curriculum. This slide's from that same webinar in February of 2023. Cheeto presented this lie as a fact to be used in K through 12 classrooms. Rewriting history, erasing Jewish peoplehood and indigeneity, and Jewish constant presence in the land of Israel. Again, remember, this took place months before the October 7th terrorist attack. So Liberated Ethnic Studies leaders held this training in Denver, Colorado. After thousands of complaints were sent to elected officials in California, guardrail language was added to the ethnic studies requirement. These guardrails were supposed to prevent anti-Jewish biases from making their way into curriculum and from being taught in the classroom. And although the guardrails proved insufficient, Liberated Ethnic Studies activists still spoke out against them. They stated that the guardrails continue to haunt them. So one must ask, why would language that prevents bigotry from being taught haunt educators? Unless, of course, their intention is to do just that, teach bigotry. Teach Palestine is a curriculum co-developed by a Northern California teacher and administrator, Samia Shoman. They use this map falsely depicting a shrinking Palestine being replaced by Israel. This is meant to portray Israel as being created on stolen land, a commonly used falsehood, along with the falsehood that Israel is a settler colonial state. There's an accompanying map, which I don't have right now, that shows shrinking Native American land in a growing American empire that is taught often side by side with this map to depict both countries as being settler colonial countries in need of dismantling. The Teach Palestine curriculum describes Hamas as a militant group, minimizing its terrorist ideology and actions. However, this isn't the only curriculum that's pushing radical agendas and rewriting history. Teaching While Muslim is a New Jersey-based organization that provides teacher training and curriculum development for K through 12 schools. And you can see on this slide, they held a teach-in on December 15th of last year on centering Palestine. And you can see also at the bottom, the workshop for educators and students. Besides the obvious obsession with centering Palestine, many of these organizations are centering anti-American ideology in their lessons, in their curriculum development, and in their teacher training. This lesson on September 11th, 2001, blames the United States for the terrorist attacks. The rationale given, and this is directly from the curriculum that Teaching While Muslim is pushing into K through 12 classrooms. The rationale states, directly influenced by US foreign policy, the tragic events of 9/11 unleashed a domino effect of events that marked an aggressive shift in US domestic and foreign policy, sparking the war on terror and an erosion of civil liberties of many Americans. So now when we see students on university campuses and in high schools proudly supporting terrorists, it's not difficult to see why. Not only are they being radicalized on social media online, but many of them spend their school day exposed to learning materials designed to do just that, radicalize them. And I'm going to stop here. And hopefully we can engage in a good conversation, maybe do some Q&A. Miriam, you're muted.
I'm gonna mute myself. I do want to start off with the questions that people sent in. Of course, you saw some already. Someone asked, how do you recommend those of us who are educators navigate these times when students are parroting dangerous narratives, trying to provoke you because they know you're Jewish and working with misinformed adults?
I think that it is a teacher's responsibility to teach the truth and to remain professional. So I'm not surprised if students do little things to try to push the buttons of a teacher. It's partially normal child development, partially the environment that we're in where there are a lack of consequences. But teachers have standards that they're supposed to educate by. And so my recommendation is that they abide by those. There are also protections if you're an educator. You have a district that is supposed to protect you in a professional sense for being harassed or targeted or being discriminated against. Also, you may have a union that's supposed to do the same. So that my suggestion is to engage all avenues to make sure that's happening. And if it isn't, that's when you reach out to organizations that can provide some sort of support and advocacy on your behalf.
And someone also asked, can you please tell us the difference in ethnic studies requirements? I mean, I'm not sure if you know this. Say requirements in high schools in, say, Illinois versus California, other major states. What should we know or do as parents to stay engaged and informed?
You have to know what's going on in your kid's classroom in the district, what the requirements are set out by the state. So I'll start with the first part of that question, the difference between the requirements in California and, say, Illinois. California has a statewide requirement that is being challenged because for multiple reasons. Some of what you saw in some of these slides, the just blatant anti-Semitism that's embedded in the curricula and in the lessons, and other issues with funding of the entire mandate being in question because it's an unfunded mandate, therefore likely not a requirement that can take effect. In Illinois, we're seeing similar, in other states, similar ideology coming into the classrooms, but not necessarily through ethnic studies. Sometimes it's a school district's DEI program. Sometimes it's their social emotional learning program. Sometimes it's through a culturally responsive education program. So in Illinois, for instance, the districts like Chicago. They may have specific district requirements. We see something similar in Minnesota, where Minneapolis, St. Paul public school system have an ethnic studies requirement, but it hadn't made it. It wasn't a state mandate at first. They're fighting that there. There are other places similar. Boston public schools, I believe, are at least considering, if they haven't gone full-fledged. I know they were testing out piloting an ethnic studies requirement, but the state of Massachusetts hadn't done it yet. We see similar things like that across the country.
Another question someone asked, what can be done to combat professors on campus who insist on teaching the settler colonial narrative about Israel?
It depends what you mean by combat it. I mean, if you're talking about as a student in class, if this is an academic environment, ideas are supposed to be challenged. That's the point of learning environment. So if you're a student in class and something is being taught that isn't true, I would urge you to challenge that untruth. If you're looking at from a position of, well, you're trying to decide where to send your kids to college, I'm not a fan of paying for. I have 4 kids. I'm a mom of 4. At least one of them is on here somewhere. Dimitri, say hello when you can. I'm not going to pay for my kid to be abused and taught something that isn't true. My Dimitri, who's on here, is our oldest child. He's 29. He has a 25-year-old brother and a 16-year-old brother and a 12-year-old sister. I've already been through college, at least with 2 of the kids. I don't understand paying tens of thousands of dollars to subject my kids to not only bigoted abuse, but then my money being used to support an institution that doesn't value education. And this conversation comes up a lot. People bring up things like, what about academic freedom? And what about, a professor's rights to academic freedom? And I always want to bring it back to scholarship. The point is about learning. And you wouldn't have a geography professor teaching classes and classes of kids that the earth is flat. They may feel that themselves and believe that themselves, but teaching their opinion as fact is not scholarship. And I think we need to really get back to the basic question of what's school for, K through 12 and higher ed. It's supposed to be based in scholarship. There are academic standards that professors are supposed to uphold in order to be professors. Their opinion doesn't replace that requirement, in my point of view.
I have a question from in the audience, Brett Feldman from Rhode Island. He asked, how much of this is state versus local jurisdiction?
It's both. So with K through 12, it's both. There's only so much the federal government can do directly for K through 12 education, because most decisions come locally from your school district, from your school board, or from the state. So that's one of the reasons why it's really important. People ask what they can do. One of the things you can do is run for school board. One of the things you can do is make sure you know who your school board members are, when the elections are, and make sure you know where they stand. And if you don't know and they don't say, ask them.
Well, Liz, do you want to ask your question in person?
Hi.
Hello.
So my question is partly personal, but on a broader sense, I have a child who is a poli-sci major and one who very likely, and I have another child who very likely will be a poli-sci major. They have not run across this yet, thank goodness, but we all know that higher education is supposed to be to embrace this intellectual discourse, but we also know that that's frequently not the case now. What is your recommendation for students who might face this challenge and face academic retribution from their professors?
I mean, that's a real thing. Retaliation is a real thing. People wonder why more people don't speak up. It's because they're afraid, because there is a very real threat of being retaliated against.
Mm-hmm.
And your child, our children, when we send them to college, are there to learn. We send them to school, they're there to learn. They're not there to be discriminated against and be victimized by a professor or their fellow students. There is a mechanism to address any retaliation. There's a mechanism to address any of the bigotry and the civil rights violations that we've seen happen on campus, and we're seeing that play out now. We have the government has a responsibility to make sure that civil rights are not being violated for any and all students. Those civil rights laws and policies need to be enforced, and when they're not, there should be consequences, just like there were generations ago.
Thank you.
Elise Karatz, she has a question.
Hi, I'm here in New York City, and my kids are out of college a while now. And it seems that, yes, the indoctrination had started a long, long time ago, because the books that are coming out that my kids had to read were part of this indoctrination. But in the past, we were involved, but we weren't on top of things. I've seen some books in elementary school these days that are so frightening and so scary as to how to conduct yourself with the police, what to think about the violence that's going on, all kinds of horrible stuff that our young kids are being exposed to. How do we monitor that? How do we monitor those books that our kids are being exposed to?
So when you look at the K through 12 system, usually it is a librarian's responsibility to see to what materials, what books are brought into the school. And if you're talking about the school library, to some teachers have their own classroom librarian. So
Yeah.
what is the conversation with the librarian, but also even before that, knowing what your school or your district's method is in determining what books should be in the libraries and in the classrooms. And sometimes in some districts, what I've seen is there are committees that decide that. Sometimes it's a DEI committee, because they want to make sure that there's representation of this group and that group and that group in the school library. So even if a librarian comes with, say, a list of wonderful books that maybe you had when you were in school, your kids had, I had when I was in school, if they don't meet the requirements of whatever committee is set up, some districts, like I said, have this DEI committee, then those books won't be approved to come into the library, but other books may. So it's knowing where the decision is made, who's responsible for it, how the decisions are made. I'm sure many of you have seen the videos of parents going to these school board meetings and reading out from some of these books at the school board, and the administrator saying, stop, that's not appropriate. And the parents like, but this is in the kids' library. And then there's debate over, are you banning books, et cetera, et cetera. I think I want to get back to kind of my one of the points I made earlier. It's about scholarship. I would never call for book burning or banning books. However, public schools are a different situation. Those are public funds. What an individual parent or individual student choose to go buy on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or their public library is completely different from what a school brings into the building that kids have access to. And I think that conversation needs to be had a lot more robustly. But knowing how does your school make the decision on what books make it into the school library or not, I think is the first step.
Thank you.
I have a question from Roz Shorstein. She's out of Watsonville, California.
Hey, Roz.
Trustees in our district maintain that anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism. They ignore our pleas that liberated ES consultant hurts Jewish community. Your advice?
Yeah. The district Roz is talking about is very problematic. Unfortunately, there are many others that are like that. This isn't, to me, going to be an argument that could be won with those specific administrators, because I'm familiar with them and their thinking. I don't think that the idea of being able to explain away or educate them into what Zionism is the win. I think, or a fight that's maybe winnable. I think the easier fight, or maybe it's not super easy, but the fight that we need to make there is, again, violation of civil rights. It is not legal to discriminate against people based on national origin. Jewish people originate from the land of Israel. So if materials coming in that discriminates against national origin, I think, I'm not an attorney, I think you speak with an attorney about possible civil rights violations. And if not an attorney, then that's something that you speak with, say, the Congressional House Committee on Education and the Workforce in DC, or other people that actually have decision-making power. But the point Roz brings up is important for all of us. It shows what happens when you get nefarious actors on a school board. They have the power to do what's happening in that school district, which is to say, oh, no, that's not discrimination, or that's not anti-Semitism. That's why it's super important to make sure that we're involved from the ground, like from the beginning, in our local school board elections.
Okay. Sandra, you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, because all of this is like so incredibly true, and we need, it's like the multi-headed beast, the octopus that we're dealing with. One of the areas that doesn't get talked about enough is the teaching of teachers at the university level. So this is something, and then how that works its way into the powerful teachers unions. Happen to be a New Yorker. I happen to spend my 40-year career mostly in education policy and programming. My last stint was at Teachers College, Columbia University. So I got to see how some of that sausage is made. But just to make it specific and local, is that very recently, the news has come across all of our screens that the UFT, which is the New York City branch of the American Federation of Teachers, and that's where Randy Weingarten started and then became president of the AFT. So the UFT is having elections. Michael Mulgrew, the current president since Randy left, was always considered, he's a Randy acolyte. So that says something to begin with for those who know what the AFT has done. But he is being challenged by several candidates who are much further to the left. They belong to the Democratic Socialists of America. They belong to other really far left Islamicist affiliated organizations, in addition to the socialists, and they have a lot of momentum. And the real danger here is, should they get elected to the head of the teachers union, it will become even worse to turn around how the material from the college level in the teachers' colleges is being filtered down and implemented from K through 12. So I'm just throwing this out there as, again, one of the tentacles of the octopus we absolutely need to address. So, Brandy, do you want to elaborate?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. A couple of years ago, and I'll put a link to it in the chat, I did a research project looking at the University of California schools of education. It was a very short, brief, just scratching the surface. Who's teaching the teachers? What are they learning? One of the reasons why I started doing the work I do now is because in January of 2018, I went back to school. I went to the University of San Francisco, the Catholic University, to get my doctorate in international and multicultural education. And I was highly alarmed at what was being taught at that level in the School of Education. It was, like you said, a lot of theoretical based pedagogy that really not only didn't do anything to address the issues in educating our young people, but seemed to rely on a lot of divisiveness and ideology that has been tied to whether it's neo-Marxism or something that just didn't seem to have its place in education. And that I think that you're right, looking at what's happening in the teachers' colleges and schools of education and departments of education, and then seeing how unions are using those schools of education to build a power base. It is highly problematic. It's very concerning. And when you talk about the DSA and Democratic Socialists of America, again, predating October 7th, 2023, they had the DSA committee on Palestine in education, and they held multiple teach-ins with teachers, again, from all over the country. People think it's just a blue state problem or it's just a coastal problem. It isn't. If that were the case, it'd be a lot easier to tackle. It's not, because teachers everywhere go to these schools of education and they're being taught, many of them, not all of them, a lot of the same things. So what you have is not just the bad actors. You have teachers, people that are going into the field because they want to do good stuff. They want to teach kids. They want to help their communities. This is what they want to do. And they're being told that the way to do that is to use these ideologies and pedagogies that are problematic.
I have another question from, make sure I get her her name. Susan Kahn, she's out of Richmond, California. She says she's an administration union leader in California. I know that many admins are open to learning more about how to recognize and respond to anti-Semitism. Best online programs they can volunteer. Do you have the best online programs they can voluntarily watch? Is any organization providing school districts, boards of trustees, superintendents with such information?
There are many that have sprouted up, some before October 7th, some afterwards. I think that while anti-Semitism may be the first wave in this storm, it's not the only wave that's coming. So anti-Semitism as a wave in education, again, it's the first one. The next wave is the anti-Americanism, which I think we're seeing more and more and more of. So really, to get to the root, to address it as an administrator, I would hope that the training would really focus on, and education for administrators would focus on, what is it kids are supposed to be learning in the classroom? Is the classroom set up so that a teacher can use a bully pulpit and spout his or her opinions and ideas and convince kids to be their little child soldiers to go march and protest? Or is the classroom meant to center student learning? So the Coalition for Empowered Education is providing educator training and professional development on things like what should be happening in school. What's the purpose of education? The North American Values Institute is doing similar things, really looking at what the classroom's supposed to be. Is it student-centered or is it supposed to be adult-centered? And I think that that's the kind of one of the pieces of the puzzle that we haven't addressed.
All right, here's another question from Jerry Cohen. Can you address student-run programs like Model UN and or College Board Common Apps, high school student participation with narratives of occupation, genocide, apartheid, etc., going to the school districts who are hosts, etc., teachers within the districts who validate and give credibility, ultimate power-based building? Jerry, did you want to?
Yeah,
expand?
sorry. I know I was trying to get everything out so fast. I came to your presentation late. It's been a crazy day, but I'm talking about, you have the school boards, you have the administration, and you have these massive districts, right? But they also house not just teachers and classrooms K through 12. They're also hosts to, a variety of extracurricular clubs, and the extracurricular clubs like Model UN, debate, etc. These are part of, kind of the resume building that they're doing to get to higher education. And so there's a lot of participation in these organizations. And then the public schools are hosting them, right? Like Model UN. Model UN is a very, quote unquote, respectable extracurricular club that you have, and then you just happen to come across what their questions are. It's called the prompts. So the Common Application also had this recently. One of their essay prompts for this year was, utilizing words that were problematic. I think Pens with Swords kind of sent their meetings that are happening. But if you're, in K through 12 and your child comes home with these prompts and you're trying to have a meeting with the district, or you're trying to alert the admin, and then they're just passing it off. Oh, well, we're just the host. of, you know, this organization, right? And then you go and you try to find the model UN, let's say, the powers that be behind that organization that everybody is doing across the country. And you know, you start looking into their curriculum development for those extracurriculars, and it's extremely problematic. We see this also, by the way, in College Board runs the AP classes, right? AP classes are all through the high schools. And so what happens is you have a lot of teachers within districts, and like you said, there's lots of good teachers that are coming with good intentions, et cetera. But these bigger organizations, not just the school districts, the Common App, College Board runs SAT, APs, Model UN, debate clubs. You find it pervasive in these things. And so where do parents or where do adults even start when they see these problems on such a local level? And it's so much there, you know, the person that they're talking in front of is the principal of the high school that's hosting the UN, the competition. And where do they go? And what's our best, you know, full disclosure, I'm an education attorney, so they often try to find me. But in terms of just being, you know, parents, what do they do? How do they fight this?
Part of the problem is we were asleep at the wheel and didn't realize how infiltrated our education system got. One of my kids was in Model UN in high school. I remember it when I was in high school. We think that the programs, the clubs, the groups that are supposed to be good, they're supposed to give kids an opportunity to expand their thinking, to challenge them, to get nervous before they go give us, like, they're supposed to do those things, aren't those things anymore. So what we actually need is a bit of a shift. We're going to have to build new things and different things. And we've seen some of it happen. We've seen new institutions be built because the old ones or the current ones aren't working anymore. They're not doing what they did generations ago. And that's a tough pill to swallow because it's a difficult thing to do, and doing it at scale is not something that's going to happen like that. None of this is going to happen overnight. The fix is not going to, it's not going to be here's the easy button. I'm going to present it to you guys. Let's push 1, 2, 3, and it's gone. Because the infiltration has gone on for so long, the ideological infiltration, and it's so deeply embedded that Model UN, I saw somebody commented that, you know, it's like the regular UN. Well, it is, it's a model of it. So the expectation that it would be what it once was, we have to grapple with that and acknowledge and accept that the reality that our kids are facing today is not the same thing that we faced when we were in school, and look for alternatives and build them where they don't exist, or support the ones that other people are building.
Okay, I have a question from Sam Friedman. He says, how much of Jew hatred is from foreign sources, Qatar, Turkey, etc., and how much is legitimately Americans who really dislike Jews?
If you're talking about education, it's both. It's the same with any other, think about any other level of terrorism. There's international terrorism, there's domestic terrorism. And part of the reason that is because it's not just coming from one stream. We're seeing a different type of Jew hatred than maybe generations before faced. Not that type ever went away, it's still there. But in education, we're seeing the normalization of anti-Jewish bigotry come from neo-Marxists and Islamists. And that's something that's relatively new in the United States. Other populations of Jews have faced both. Many of them we know them, we're friends with them, we're married to them. But it's relatively new in the United States. So I think that's we're not going to be able to combat Islamist or neo-Marxist anti-Semitism the same way we combat it when it comes from neo-Nazis.
Okay, I have a question from Sherry Wicker. She asks, what is the role of CAIR or CARE? What is the best method to educate how they're anti-American organization without sounding like conspiracy theorist or Islamophobe?
I think the best way is just to let CARE say what they say. They don't really, they don't hide their Jew hatred or their hatred of the United States. They say it themselves. I don't. The other part of it is not that I ever want to come across as any slur or as a conspiracy theorist or an Islamophobe, but sticks and stones. If saying that the Muslim Brotherhood are a terrorist organization and any organization supported or that support the Muslim Brotherhood should not be operating in our school, it means somebody's going to call me a bad name, so be it. CARE says, I mean, they say it. There's audio, there's video that's in their writing, their plans for the United States of America and what they think about our democratic republic. That organization has no place in our schools.
Now, I want to add on to that. You do have a lot of members of CARE who are running for public positions. I actually live in Ocala, and the executive head of CARE lives here. They have a practice. She ran for mayor of Ocala, and the interesting part, she ran as a Republican as mayor of Ocala. So a lot of people just assumed, you know, she didn't win, but some people assumed, oh, she might be decent or it might be a good person. So a lot of times they're coming across as, I would say, wolf in sheep's clothing.
And that is a super good point. There's a recording now that's making the rounds in social media where one of the CARE members says, you know, their plan, we want to get X amount of people in elected office. There are other ones that we want to get X amount of people that are attorney. Like there's a plan, and then they say what they want to do once they get those positions. So I think that letting them speak for themselves and be like, I don't believe me, listen to what they say is the best exposure.
I have another question. It says, it seems pretty hopeless that things will change in my lifetime. What is the status of Jewish schools developing in neighborhoods where public schools are toxic? Let me get to the rest. We should be ready for school vouchers when they arrive.
We've seen parents, especially since October 7th, pull their kids out of public school system, many of them going to day schools, a lot of them actually being put into Catholic schools. We've seen, again, new institutions pop up. There are classical schools that are popping up, not just because parents are tired of their kids being having to experience anti-Jewish bigotry, but because they're tired of their kids going to school not learning. So I think that we see those things happening. Vouchers and school choices, one method perhaps of dealing with what we're seeing happen in our schools. I don't think it's the fix everybody hopes it to be, because of the point that Sandra, that you made. We still need to find teachers that know how to teach. And if the schools of education are putting out teachers, no matter how well intended, but they're ill prepared, we're going to run into the same problem at day school, Jewish day schools, at charter schools, at Catholic schools. Like we need to educate generations of teachers and how to teach.
I have another question from Elias Del Rosario. How can we balance support for Israel and Zionism while ensuring Israel remains a democratic state?
I'm not concerned with Israel not being a democratic state. Israel's a democracy. And honestly, point blank, I'm not an Israeli citizen. So it's not my responsibility to ensure Israel stays a democratic state. I'm an American citizen. I have two sons who are Israeli citizens, and the way they can ensure it is by participating in their democracy, just like we can participate in our democracy here. Zionism, support for Israel, goes deeper than any type of political system. Zionism is believing that Jews have the right to our indigenous homeland, to be emancipated, to be sovereign in our land. Support for Israel is supporting not just the land and a country that holds, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't, the country doesn't have to hold every political position I hold for me to support the state of Israel. It also, I think we look at it, when my support for Israel isn't just the country, it's the people. When we talk about Am Yisrael, we're not talking about just a country, we're talking about us.
I have a question from Sharon Weiss. What is the best way to affect change? So much damage has been done with all the propaganda and false information.
My aunt, Charlotte, has told me multiple times, democracy is a participatory sport. Get in the game.
Jonathan Porges from New Hampshire asked, has there been a push to educate parents and students on what to do if this progress to violence, both and enduring, and what to do if this progress to violence, both in the during and immediate aftermath? I'm not sure what they're trying to say.
Didn't understand.
Okay. Let's see, we'll go through all the questions. Here's a good one. Judy Peterson wrote, how do we decouple intersectionality as an educational model from social studies and literature? Students at my local middle school are taught to examine literature from a who has the power and who has a privilege standpoint.
I think that it is such a narrow idea, looking at who has power and who doesn't, to use that as a method of teaching. And it makes no sense. It's just completely illogical. So just looking at the whole idea of power and who's the dominant narrative, who's the counter narrative, is a silly way to teach. If you're teaching kids literature, you're supposed to be teaching them the messages and the morals of that piece of literature, which has nothing to do with narratives and these theoretical concepts. When somebody, and the other piece of it is it's dehumanizing. All of us that are on this Zoom right now have a level of privilege, and all of us on this Zoom right now have been in positions where we've been powerless, because that's what it means to be human. Literature is supposed to be one of those things kids learn to develop empathy skills, to learn about humanity. And humanity can't just be broken down into the powerless and the powerful, the oppressed and the oppressor. It's such a shrinking and narrowing of what it means to be human if we're talking about, especially if we're talking about living in a civilization. And I think that ideology is really taking us backwards. I think it's taking us backwards to where we're going to experience, if it continues, a 21st century dark ages. It's so simplistic.
Kim Lippitz asked a question. We live in a very Jewish area, but what we see often is other Jews who are standing against those of us trying to combat anti-Semitism in our school district. It is very difficult to address issues we face in our school district surrounding anti-Semitism when it's often other Jews who are giving the district a pass and gaslighting our very real experiences.
I think that unfortunately that's something that we're facing a lot of, and really struggling with how do we address it. There are people that legitimately are just using their as a Jew card to get into certain circles because they're something else before they're a Jew. So whether that's they're progressive, or they want to be seen as liberal, or they want to be seen as this, and that, whatever it is, that label is what they preference over being a member of the tribe. And it's a problem. But I don't, if everyone's lived experience counts, then each of our lived experiences count too, and those people don't get to speak for us.
Robert Smith asked, should we encourage our kids and ourselves to wear Jewish stars, etc., in public?
Yes. Big ones. I don't have my biggest. Yes. I don't, I'm not a, I'm not a, I think kowtowing to the mob is bad and dangerous in the long term. I think not teaching our next generation to exude Jewish pride and to be unapologetic is a problem in the long term. Bullies respond to strength. So we need to stand up.
Someone, Brett Feldman wrote, you mentioned earlier the comparison to U.S. colonialism and Native American lands. I have been wondering if more of these people are anti-U.S. as well, or if they are hypocrites.
Both. No, there's a lot of anti-American sentiment. So when I've looked through like dozens and dozens of curricula, and I see the constant comparison to certain things that have happened historically here in the U.S. or that's happening now with what's happening in Israel and with the Arabs there. And so from curricula and lessons on the border wall or the border fence here and the security fence there, and, oh, we didn't cross the border, or the wall crossed us. The same type of examples are used, like I mentioned, with the map of the shrinking Palestine. The same map, a map of America showing shrinking native land, is used here. And part of the reason is because it's all wrapped in identity. So if I were an ideologue that wants to convince kids that the Palestinian Arabs are the good guys, and the good guys mean that they're native or indigenous or brown or BIPOC or whatever terminology you want to use that's used to describe the good guys, then I need to use the comparison and be able to use it here. And that's what's being done. History is being completely rewritten. Jewish peoplehood is being completely erased to fit a narrative that isn't true. And if that side was actually for peace and for the humanity of both sides and all the things that you hear people say when they're actually asked or confronted, then they wouldn't have to deny that the Palestinian Arabs today are descendants of Arab colonizers before. But they can't, because the idea is that being a descendant of somebody who was a colonizer before is bad and puts you in the oppressor camp, is something that they can't grapple with. So they just take the identity of Jews. I mean, we've seen it the past 18 months, the baby Jesus wrapped in a keffiyeh at the Vatican. To Moses was Palestinian, to who else? King David. I mean, I've heard it all. And there's a reason behind that. And that reason is both hypocritical and anti-American, because it also can't, people that agree to that ideology can't face the truth of history. And the truth is, horrible things happened in the founding of the United States of America, and great things happened too. And for that ideology, you can't have both.
Now here's another question. K through 12 curriculum appears to be increasingly laying the groundwork for today's most prevalent form of anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, calling for the ethnic cleansing of half the world's Jews. The curriculum is often determined by state departments of education with very little external accountability. Most notably, the curriculum disconnects Jews from Israel, not covering ancient Israel and its colonization by Babylonians, Romans, Arabs, etc. Jews appear as a persecuted people in medieval Europe, experience the Holocaust, and then disappear again. What is the best way to counter this? What free or low-cost curricula are available to school systems to help correct that local advocacy groups can push their school boards to adopt?
Two things on this. One, there are many great curricula on Jewish peoplehood and ancient Israel, and the stories of and lessons of our people. Stand With Us has great material that schools should be using. So I'll get that there. That's the positive side. Now I'll be a Debbie Downer. It's only, the curriculum's only as good as who's going to use it. So we have to go back again to, if you have teachers that are convinced that they can't teach that, if they're convinced that Zionism is white supremacy, do you think that they're going to teach that great curriculum that Stand With Us has developed? I mean, part of the problem of having great curriculum isn't that's not the main problem. The main problem is we've said it over and over and over and explained it, and we're trying to educate people into the truth and who Jews really are, and Jews experience oppression, and Jews are the indigenous people of Israel, and et cetera. We've tried to come to two-state solution time and time again. There's a reason that message isn't sticking. And I think that we need to really think about why. Are we at a point, and I've asked this before, what happens when we get to the point where the truth doesn't matter? And the next question is, are we at that point?
I have a question from Brian. He says, I believe at last count, there are only 20 states that have mandatory Holocaust education. Do you think if every state was mandated to teach about the Holocaust, it would help in the fight against anti-Semitism? Also, do you agree that the Holocaust education should be taught by talking about the rise of anti-Semitism that led to it?
I get asked this question a lot about more Holocaust education. And maybe my answer is controversial, but like I said, sticks and stones, I'll say it anyway. I don't think Holocaust education is the answer to contemporary anti-Semitism. Should kids learn about the Holocaust? Of course. It's something that happened in history. It was an incredibly important event, not just for Jewish people, but for the world, for the West, for the United States. Of course, people should learn about the Holocaust, like they should learn about a lot of other important events. And yes, they should learn what led up to it. Otherwise, it's not really good Holocaust education. However, that's not the anti-Semitism that most kids are experiencing in school today. The anti-Semitism most kids are experiencing in school today would be better learned if we studied the anti-Semitism in the former Soviet Union, or in Iran, or Iraq, or the Farhud, or in Ethiopia. So if we're talking about what should kids learn as a tool to combat anti-Semitism, I don't think that Holocaust education is that tool. That doesn't mean I don't think it should be taught. I think it should be taught in every state.
Rowie asked the question, how to encourage American Jewish families to make self-defense a fundamental value. JCCs, synagogues, Jewish day schools, etc., should be only loudly promoting self-defense. But that's unfortunately not what we see. Yet, how do we encourage this?
I think holding classes. I have seen many more Krav Maga classes popping up, and whether that was somebody holding it on their own in a park, or whether that was a Krav Maga gym, or whether that was at a JCC, I've seen more of it. People, the organizations need to know that it's a want and a need, and that people will come if they offer it.
Okay, that's all the questions that we had that were submitted in advance. If anybody hasn't asked a question before, if you wanted to ask a question now, please feel free to do so.
Hey, can I ask a question just by unmuting? Is that all right?
Well, sure, but we prefer people to raise their hand just in case.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm so not technologically advanced. You mean in the chat or the raise your hand?
Right. Go ahead.
So this was excellent. Thank you so much for doing this presentation, and for, your responses are literally like words out of my mouth out of the past 18 months. Do you, is there opportunity to, have speakers come to school districts and university campuses, et cetera, IEU, and do you do that?
Yes, I do. Yes, I have. I think that we do need more of that. And one of the things, actually, you bring up a good point, and it doesn't have to be me, but there's a reason why Jewish Zionist speakers keep getting shouted down off of trying to, with the other side trying to shout us down off of campuses. To me, that tells me, all right, we need more of it.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question. Me, Don Sable. I started writing it, and then you said you welcomed us to ask. So I'd like to know. I don't use, and it's great to see you there, Brand. Wonderful. This has been great. Thank you. I don't use the word anti-Zionist. I went to hear Rabbi David Wolpe gave a talk during a weekend. He was at local synagogue. So Sunday, he was there the whole weekend. So Sunday, people or others not in the shul were invited to go. He used that word, and I've been meaning to write to him. I haven't done it yet, but because I think if you use the word anti-Zionist, it gives a respectability to a anti-Semitic discussion of whether Israel should exist or not. So I never use that term. And I want to ask you two others to comment on terms. So the word anti-Zionist, then he used something, I don't know who it was in reference to, about a self-hating Jew. And I do not use that expression either, because I don't know what's in Bernie Sanders' mind or Norman Finkelstein's mind or some of these other bizarre people who were born Jewish, if I can call them bizarre, because of some of the things Bernie has done and Finkelstein. So I call them anti-Semitic Jews. Some of the Jews involved with Jewish Voice for Peace who are so hostile and anti-Semitic. I don't throw out the words lightly, but I call them anti-Semitic Jews. So I just wanted to ask you about using, Zionism or anti-Zionism. I say if somebody's, an anti-Zionist, I just say, I don't even address that, but I say they're anti-Israel, they're anti-Semitic, period. So I just wanted to get your thought on self-hating Jews and anti-Zionism. Thank you.
I heard someone else they referred to self-hating Jews as Jew-hating Jews, because they said they don't seem to really hate themselves, but they hate the rest of us. So I thought that was pretty good. I do talk about anti-Zionism, and I use that phrase. I think that you have a point. It can be confusing to some because so many people don't know what Zionism is. So they don't understand, or they don't even, you don't get to the point of engagement to have the conversation. When I do get to the position or the time to have the conversation, I talk about Zionism is to Jews as emancipation is to Black Americans. Either you believe people have the right to be free and sovereign, or you don't. And if you don't believe they have the right to be free or sovereign, you're no different than a slaver. And I leave it at that. There are a few people on the world that think that nobody should have borders, so they don't believe in any states. I'm setting those people aside. I don't see the same people. The people that say that they just don't think Israel has the right to exist as a Jewish state are perfectly fine with Palestine existing as an Arab state. So that tells me that their position is that Jews should always have to be second-class citizens, dhimmis. That's anti-Jewish.
I have another question from the group. It says, with regard to the importance of scholarship, I believe we must also focus on the importance of language and its manipulation by the left. My daughter attends George Washington, and last year parents received email alerts that there were protests. This year, those alerts now state there are First Amendment activity taking place. I learned that teachers in Long Island School District have begun to use this terminology. Does this not relax the pro-Hamas protests and allow them to grow?
Of course, I mean, there's a point to that, and part of it may be a university being concerned about their liability, as far as do they have to respond. If it's listed as a protest, then that means the protest has to follow certain guidelines and policies that the university sets out. If it's listed or defined as a First Amendment activity, then the university's like, oh, they're just exercising their First Amendment. There's nothing for us to do. And I think that, yes, language is super important when talking about that. What was interesting to me and a little bit disheartening after these protests started popping up on campuses is everybody kept saying pro-Palestinian protest. And I said, no, they're pro-Hamas. There's nowhere in these protests that people are asking for whoever's governing the Palestinian Arabs to have equal rights, to have gender equality, for there to be gay rights, for there to be religious liberty for religious minorities. There was nothing about them that was pro-Palestinian. Everything was pro-Hamas because it was anti-Israel and anti-Jewish. Language does matter. And our side has to do a better job at acknowledging that, paying attention to the things that we say.
I have one more question. Sarah Layton has a question, so I'm going to unmute her.
Hi. I pose this to, and I'm a psychologist, and I'm on the listserv for Psychologists Against Antisemitism, and I pose this in with that group. But I've always wondered what can we say, like Zionism and Zionists, or derivative terms, that they're ethnocultural religious terms, and so when they're misused, that is cultural misappropriation. So when people like use it as a slur, that is cultural misappropriation. That's the very thing that all of this training is, I've been taught, right? You don't engage in cultural misappropriation. So I wonder why is this cultural misappropriation, there's an exception made for, like, I always say, well, can't you just use another word? Like when I see signs that say, whatever terrible thing about Zionists, I think, can't you just say something other than Zionist? Why that I guess this goes back to the language, but I feel like the language is it's clearly used to wound Jews. But then when we try to fight it, it's like, oh, no, that's not anti-Semitism, it's anti-Zionism. And can't we just say, well, then don't just leave Zionism aside. That's an ethnocultural religious term. You don't have to use it. Say exactly what you mean. If you mean Jews, say Jews. If you mean Israel, say Israel. If you mean the Netanyahu, say Netanyahu. Why does everything get collapsed into this ethnocultural religious term and become misappropriated?
I think for a couple of reasons. I think one of them is that there's this actual effort to portray Zionism as something that it isn't. So to completely misdefine or redefine what Zionism is, I think the other part is there has been an erasure of Jewish peoplehood. So this is something we hear. This is where language is important. Jews are the most targeted religious group on hate crimes. No, Jews are the most targeted group minority group, sure, but secular Jews are targeted by hate crimes. It's the targeting we see when we look at the statistics, like the FBI statistics on anti-Semitism. Those aren't religious based, all of them. They're people based. So when we talk about Jewish peoplehood and what Zionism means, and should it be a protected category as far as civil rights? Well, if Zionism is my right as a Jewish person, my peoplehood, to be a person and be a free person in my homeland, to have a right to that, then if we can define it like that, then yes, of course we can talk about, well, if you're saying Zionist, we know it's code word for Jew. But when we're talking to people who want to just misdefine Jews and say that, well, Jews are only a religious group, or Jews are white, or Jews are European, or whatever other word, it's because they're trying to decouple the peoplehood of what it means to be an ancient ethno-religious group. And a lot of times it's just a dog whistle.
We have one more question because I know we do need to wrap it up. Leanne Sherman, because I know you haven't asked a question.
Yes, hi, thank you. Actually, I think I posted it, but it's two questions. One is, excuse me, in addition to being involved with school boards, what else can we do? And then secondly, how much, if any, let me just read what I wrote here. How much of a correlation is there between anti-Semitism in the schools and the influx of people, individuals from Muslim majority countries in recent years?
The last question, I'm not sure because I have not followed the statistics, and I don't know. It could easily be correlation, not causation, and I have not done enough research to give an accurate answer, so I'm not sure.
Okay.
But one of the reasons I wanted to point out that this has been happening before October 7th is because it's an indicator that there has been a march through our school system, just one of the systems that there's been a march through, that many of us were unaware of, or we weren't paying attention to. And what it looks like for people that have been tracking it before October 7th is October 7th was the call to arms. It wasn't the culmination of all of these things. It was, let's escalate.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it seems like and looks like in the education space. So while many people, I think many school administrators probably thought, let them demonstrate, it's going to die off, I don't think that they were accurately measuring the temperature of what is actually happening. And I don't remember your first part. You said
Oh,
besides.
sure. What else can we do in addition to being involved with the school board or being aware of the school board members and voting and so forth?
I think making sure that our elected officials, even our local ones, our representatives, are doing what they're supposed to be doing, what they're paid to do, what they were voted into office to do. So when we have these city councils that are signing ceasefire resolutions and even giving any of this any type of game time, stage time, that we need to call them out for that. City councils don't determine international relations, but they can change the temperature of a community. So when you look at Oakland, California, when you look at Berkeley, when you look at these city councils that have voted for ceasefire resolutions, what has happened in the streets of those communities? An uptick in anti-Jewish bigotry. Huge, because it became normalized and accepted to target Jews. So I think that, I think that a lot of the stuff that we're looking at is going to require a political solution. I think many of it's going to, many of the things we see will require a legal solution. But again, none of it's going to be quick or easy.
Okay, I do have one more question or statement from Richard Golden, who is one of our Harut board members.
Good evening. I'm glad to see the number of people who attended, and Dr. Shufutinsky's answers were phenomenal. It's a difficult question to answer as to what we can do besides our local school boards, but the simplistic answer is to get involved with Zionist and Jewish organizations and programs that are not wholly on the fringes of Judaism and Zionism. That leads me to the selfless plug, as I like to say, is that we need to participate. We need to be active in the 39th World Zionist Congress. That's one of the purposes of Harut, and that is to represent those people who are not on the fringes, those people who are here asking very serious and probing questions about anti-Zionism, anti-Semitism, the relationship between the two. What is the source of the modern day anti-Semitism? Certainly, the answer, with regard to looking at Soviet anti-Semitism, from the late 1960s and early 1970s is a great place to start. So my next couple comments would be is we have to vote. We have to vote in the upcoming World Zionist Congress. And the proposal is to vote for Beirut, North America, which is slate number 23. Beyond that, we have to promote the vote. We need to reach out to our friends, our families, our coworkers, our business associates, students, especially students, because this issue is going to affect students more than it's going to affect people like me. I'm a senior citizen. I'm beyond that, but I'm looking out for my grandchildren now. So you need to promote this vote, anyone over the age of 18. And the next thing you have to do is join Beirut, North America. The website, I think, had been posted, but it also, so you know it, is www.herutna.org. Go there. There's invaluable information, testimonies, ways for you to get involved in the Jewish community, in the Zionist community, and in the world that links the two of them together for us. And for those parents out there, and I don't know, I wouldn't know who is a parent or not a parent, of college-age children. It is my understanding that there is an offer out there from an anonymous donor that membership for seniors in high school and first-year college students for first-year membership for no charge. So join. It's not going to cost you anything to join and learn. And that way your students can learn with you. Thank you.
And Brandy, people are asking, how can they get in touch with you?
I will put my email address in the chat.
And I know Sandra had something to say. Sandra, if you could do it, say within a minute so we can wrap this up.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to point out, and Brandy, everything you say, you're just brilliant. One thing that as Jews, I think we just need to realize and understand that we kind of have to fight these things together, is that so many of these far left ideologies that have also, that teachers have been taught in the universities to teach to first graders through 12th, that those are a part of the very same problem. So if we're going to deal with the Jew hate that we see, we also need to understand that all those crazy ideologies that are part of the critical theory movement, trans ideology, gender ideology, intersectionality, which is and that whole thing, that's the power dynamic, as opposed to what this country was actually built on, which is an ongoing negotiation among factions, rather than power dynamics of one group overriding another. I think that just gives us a larger perspective to realize that like the push, like the whack-a-mole, we can't not realize what's going on. And do you agree, Brandy?
Yeah, I do. I think well said.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I want to thank you so much, Brandy, for being with us today and speaking with us. And as maybe people do not know, Brandy is also on our slate for the World Zionist Congress.
Yep.
So this is a person that, if you enjoy what she had to say and you believe in what she had to say, please vote so we can get her to the World Zionist Congress. I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight, and hopefully we might have a part 2 on this, because I do think this is something that's not going to go away. It's getting worse. It's increasing with time. We're seeing more even though there are some changes, but you know, I would say everything's already in the mix, and we've just got to take the heat off and push everything backwards and go back to where we were, not only as people, but only in education. Because instead of us learning how to respect each other's differences, and just learn basic knowledge, too much of education has become more or less activist education. So again, I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight, and we hope to see you all and hope to hear more from you. And again, Brandy, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Good night,
All right.
everyone.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Right. Thank you so much.